It's our pleasure to move into our next session of presentations. First, presenting on a change in API supplier, drug substance quality tips. Our presenter, Dr. Keduo Qian, is a senior reviewer in the Division of Lifecycle API, Office of New Drug Products. Keduo has experience reviewing drug substances in support of various types of FDA applications. She is a relied upon leader in the review of complex APIs, particularly oligosaccharides and iron-containing macromolecular complexes. Our next presentation is on a change in API supplier drug product quality tips. The first presenter for this presentation is Dr. Rajib Paul, who is a Senior Pharmaceutical Quality Assessor for the Division of Post-Marketing Activities 2, which is responsible for post-marketing activities for generic drugs, including the assessment of ANDA supplements and CDER. Dr. Paul has been at FDA since 2014, starting as a CMC assessor for ANDAs and ANDA supplements. He also serves on multiple working groups to facilitate the drug product review process. Our final presenter in this presentation is Dr. Bo Jiang, who joined the FDA in 2013 as a chemist reviewer in OGD, reviewing CMC sections of ANDA applications for various dosage forms. In 2015, Bo transferred to OPF within OPQ as a process reviewer to focus on assessment of manufacturing process and facilities. In 2016, Bo started as acting QAL in Branch 1 of DPMA 1 and has worked as a senior pharmaceutical quality assessor since November 2021. Bo's been involved in multiple work groups, which include and are related to data integrity of OPMA data integrity, OPQ facility withdrawal working group, OPQ AIP MAP working group, and OPQ DI MAP working group. Next, we present on managing quality post-approval. Our first presenter in this presentation is Dr. Paul Swartz. Dr. Swartz is the Director of the Division of Pharmaceutical Scientists in the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, responsible for evaluating manufacturing changes for approved generic drugs. In this capacity, he also works closely with the drug shortage staff at CDER in helping alleviate or prevent drug shortages for critical medical necessary drugs. Our final presenter in this presentation is Dr. Gabinga Okabadeyo, who is currently the Division Director for Post-Marketing Activities in the Office of Program and Regulatory Operations, Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. He joined FDA in 2013 as a Regulatory Business Process Manager in OPRO and subsequently held the positions of Acting Quality Assessment Lead and Branch Chief. Our final presentation before the Q&A panel is on inspection tips, best practices for remote interactive evaluations, and other alternative inspection approaches. Our first presenter in this presentation is Dr. Lane Christensen, who's currently a branch chief in CDER's OPQ, Office of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment. He joined the FDA in 2009 and has also held positions with CDRH, Office of Compliance, CDER OGD, and the OC, Office of Global Policy and Strategy, completing international assignments and positions with FDA's India and China offices. Our final presenter for this presentation is Michael Chasey, who's the Director of the Division of Pharmaceutical Quality Programs within ORA. He provides leadership and oversight for the coordination of domestic and international inspectional activities related to pharmaceutical products, including a mutual reliance agreement activities. Prior to this role, he served as a branch chief overseeing the foreign inspection program and the foreign dedicated drug cadre. He has played an instrumental role in the development of various alternative tool policies used to supplement on-site inspections during the public health emergency. Please join me in welcoming our first presenter, Dr. Keduo Qian.
Thanks for the introduction. Hello everyone. Today I'd like to share with you on the keys surrounding the change in API supplier, focusing on the drug substance risk assessment perspectives. First, I will briefly talk about the pre-approval changes to the drug substances. In December 2000, FDA has published guidance for industry entitled Alternate Source of the Active Pharmaceutical Ingredient in Pending ANDAs. This guidance focuses on the use of alternate sources of the API in unapproved ANDAs. To substitute an alternative source of the API, the following circumstances should exist. First, the original API source is not being withdrawn due to deficiencies specifically relating to that API, such as the lack of adequate controls, evidence of alteration, or evidence of falsification of data. If any of these situations apply, then a new acceptable bioequivalence batches may need to be submitted to support the alternate source of the API. Second, the previous bioequivalence batches and bioequivalence studies should be acceptable, and also the specifications of the alternate source API and the test data should be essentially the same as the original source API, so that the quality can be ensured. The applicants should submit an amendment to their pending application requesting the withdrawal of the primary API supplier, with the supporting information to add the new supplier, just as expected for any supplier of an API. Most commonly, the ANDA applicants and DMF holders found a necessity to report the changes towards the drug substance in the application's post-approval stage. In April of 2004, FDA has published the final guidance for industry entitled Changes to an Approved NDA or ANDA. It covers recommended reporting categories for post-approval changes for drugs. Recently, in September of 2018, fulfilling the commitment of GDUFA II, FDA has published the draft guidance for industry entitled Post-Approval Changes to Drug Substances. It focuses on changes to drug substance manufacturing during the drug product application's post-approval period. Specifically, it addresses how the risk of one or more changes to the drug substance should be assessed and outlines recommended documentations to support the change. Please note that FDA's guidance or draft guidance do not establish legally enforceable responsibility. It only describes the agency's current thinking on a topic and should be viewed as a recommendation. The draft guidance applies to synthetic drug substances and the synthetic steps involved in preparing semi-synthetic drug substances. It covers the following changes. First, the facility scale and equipment changes associated with all steps of the drug substance manufacturing. It discusses the specification changes to starting materials, raw materials, intermediate, and unfinished and final drug substances. It discusses the synthetic manufacturing process changes and changes to the source of the drug substance, also changes to the container closure system for the drug substance. Facility changes generally do not include modifications to the synthetic pathway. The applicant or DMF holder is responsible for ensuring that any new manufacturing facility is operating in accordance with cGMP regulations. Here I would like to clarify that a change from one drug substance manufacturer to another is considered a change in the source of the drug substance instead of a change of facility. In this regard, it is just likely a new API supplier with a new DMF. Please ensure that the LOA to reference the new DMF is on file. The involved facility in this new supplier are included in your 356H, and the new DMF will undergo regular risk assessment if it's not already found adequate. When your current existing referenced master file submits a change of facility, especially adding a new manufacturing site, we sometimes encounter a situation called hidden facilities, which are those recommended facilities that are in the DMF but do not appear on the NDA or ANDA's 356H form. The facilities that are recommended to be included are listed here. The final drug substance manufacturing, micronization, sterilization, and testing sites, sites for intermediates addressed by ICH-Q7, facilities used for storing or warehousing drug substance prior to a disposition decision. The critical intermediate site is the most common hidden facility that is not included in the applicant's 356H. Determination of critical intermediate is made on a case-by-case basis, using principles as outlined in ICH-Q11. List all recommended DMF facilities in the application will greatly facilitate the agency's assessment, so please communicate all required facilities and their responsibilities early to your applicants. Whether or not the DMF facility is listed in the application will not change the determination whether it needs a comprehensive evaluation. If a hidden facility is identified, the following comment will be sent to the ANDA applicant, and there may be an extension of the performance goal day. So please make sure you include all the recommended facility in your 356H form. Specification change usually happens when a USP monograph becomes available or is updated for a drug substance. There are also other situations that a specification may have to be modified due to the impurity profile non-equivalency, usually because of a manufacturing process change. While the drug substance specification should be updated to comply with the compendial standards, if impurities that are listed in the compendium cannot be formed in your process, then they do not need to be included in the specification. However, you should provide a footnote to the specification and COA of the final drug substance to state that the impurity is just not possible based on your ROS. Please remember to provide appropriate method verification or validation reports as applicable as listed here. Also, if an in-house method is used for assay or related substance, when a compendium method is available, please remember to provide method equivalency report to demonstrate the in-house method is comparable or better than the compendium method. We recommend using a crude API sample or a sample spiked with the specified impurities at the specification limits for the method equivalency purposes. Please avoid using a very clean drug substance that show every impurity to be not detected. Manufacturing process changes, especially changes in route of synthesis, are considered to have a moderate to high potential to adversely affect the impurity profile of the drug substance. The manufacturing process should be validated using the new route of synthesis. Impurity carryover studies and spec purge studies should be conducted as appropriate, and control of mutagenic impurities in or expected to be in the final drug substance should be evaluated according to SHM7. Any modification to drug substance manufacturing carries some risk of causing an adverse impact on quality. Each drug substance manufacturer should assess the particular proposed modification to their drug substance to determine the risk associated with the change. Certain modifications are viewed as less likely to result in an adverse impact than others, and late-stage changes usually has a greater adverse impact on the quality of the drug substance and consequently on the drug product. A central principle underlying the risk assessment is that a change in the drug substance manufacturing process can be adequately assessed by comparing 3 consecutive pilot or commercial scale batches of pre- and post-modification material to determine if the quality of the post-modification material is equivalent to the pre-change material. Evaluation may include, but is not limited to, a comparison of impurities in pre- and post-modification intermediates, unfinished drug substance, or the final drug substance. A comparison of drug substance physical properties before after modification and drug substance stability data. If the impurity profile of an isolated material following the change is equivalent to that of pre-change material, the drug substance impurity profile is considered unaffected by the modification. It is important to determine the stage in the manufacturing process at which impurities of the isolated material should be evaluated. After the proper intermediate or drug substance is identified for comparison purposes, the level of existing and new organic impurities, residual solvents, and elemental impurities should be compared per the related SH guidelines. It is also very important to determine the potential for the formation of mutagenic and unusually toxic impurities, including nitrosamines per the SHM7 and the FDA guidance on control of nitrosamine impurities in human drugs. The adequacy of the analytical procedures should be established to support their usage. If the manufacturing modification occurs at an upstream step before the final intermediate is produced, and the equivalence cannot be demonstrated for the intermediate isolated immediately following the change, then the impurity search should be extended to the next downstream intermediate. Please note that the impurity search should also be expanded to include appropriate downstream impurities that may be formed based on your process's chemistry. The evaluation and comparison should be repeated downstream further if necessary. In case that you are not aware of, the reauthorization of the GDUFA III program features a number of enhancements, include a mechanism to enable assessment of DMFs in advance of certain ANDA and PAI submissions. Pursuant to commitments under GDUFA III, FDA issued a draft guidance for industry entitled Review of Drug Master Files in advance of certain ANDA submissions under GDUFA. It describes instances when an early assessment, or so-called DMF per-hour assessment, could be requested by a DMF holder, and the circumstances under which FDA would commence an early assessment of Type 2 API DMFs, 6 months per hour to an ANDA or PAI submission referencing the DMF. Such circumstances mainly involve products that could help mitigate or resolve a drug shortage issue, or product that could help address a public health emergency. The draft guidance provides recommendations for such DMF holders when making a request. Please refer to the guidance for details for eligibility. The DMF per hour assessment is not available for the review of drug substance information submitted in an ANDA. To assist the DMF holder in submitting such request, a list of elements FDA recommends to be included in the cover letter of the per-hour assessment request is provided in the guidance and is attached here. Here are some take-home messages from the talk that I will not read through, and links to guidances I have covered. Thank you for attending, and we welcome any questions.
Good afternoon. In this session, we will be talking about change in API supplier and associated drug product quality tips. We will discuss quality considerations for applications when changing API supplier, focusing the impact on drug product quality from drug product quality assessment perspective and facility assessment perspective. Learning objectives are: understand the common reasons for changing API source, identify required CMC information from the ANDA applicant, determine ANDA supplement reporting category for new API source, understand what facility information for API supplier is required in drug applications, understand the impact of data integrity violations on drug applications. In this session, I am going to present the drug product quality assessment perspective. My talk will include the common reasons for alternate API source in pending ANDAs and ANDA supplements. What is the supporting CMC information the applicant should provide to change the API source? what will be the supplement reporting category for changing API supplier. And my colleague, Dr. Bo Jiang, will discuss on facility assessment perspective. His talk will include facility review for API supplier change and data integrity assessment and impact on applications. Drug product quality assessment perspective. What are the common reasons for changing API source? ANDA was approvable. However, an unsatisfactory CGMP inspection status for the primary API supplier and new API is proposed. API supplier remain unacceptable or inadequate and the application cannot be approved. Increase the capacity of the drug product manufacturing and therefore additional API supplier is proposed. Withdraw the original API supplier and add a new supplier. Now this change in API source is applicable for both pending ANDAs and post-approval changes, meaning ANDA supplement. To change the API source, the applicant should provide following CMC information. The applicant should compare physicochemical properties and impurities of the API and provide the justification. Drug substance manufacturer certificate of analysis and drug product manufacturer certificates of the analysis for the drug substance from alternate API source. At least one batch of pilot or commercial scale drug product should be manufactured. Minimum of 3 months long-term and 3 months accelerated drug product stability data should be provided in the submission. In addition, in vitro testing of the drug product for new API source should be performed. Comparative dissolution data, depending on the dosage form of the drug product, should be provided. When the drug substance is highly soluble, comparative multi-point dissolution study using application or compendial medium and approved testing conditions should be conducted. When the drug substance solubility is low, comparative multi-point dissolution study using multi-pH media with approved testing conditions should be conducted. When the comparative dissolution profile for the drug product is similar, the new source of the API is supported. What will be the supplement reporting category for changing API supplier? Changing the drug substance supplier to another manufacturer involves more than simply a site change. There will be additional differences like new or modified route of synthesis, manufacturing process, solvents, or equipment in most cases. Because of the substantial risk involved, alternate drug substance source should be reported in a prior approval supplement. However, when new API source is approved as a PAS in another ANDA from the same applicant, the applicant can report the same alternate API source for their other drug products as a CV30. Let me discuss a case study where a supplement was submitted for an alternate or new API source. The supplement was submitted as CV30 reporting category, and the decision was the supplement denied to PS by the agency. Alternate API source should be a PS as per the guidance for industry. Changes to an approved NDA or ANDA questions and answers that was published in January 2001, Manufacturing Sites section, question 1, answer 1, and supported by the draft guidance for industry, post-approval changes to drug substances that was published in September 2018, section 11. This new source of the drug substance is considered to have a high potential to have an adverse effect on the drug substance's impurity profile and physical properties that may affect the quality of the drug product. Therefore, the CV30 supplement was denied to PAS. As I mentioned earlier in a slide about the exceptions for CVE30 category, once the proposed alternate API source supplement is approved as a PS for the same applicant, and if there are no other changes to be reported that would otherwise belong in a PS type reporting category, the applicant can report the same change, that is the same alternate API source, for their other drug products as a CVE30. However, the API manufacturing site or the testing sites should have a satisfactory cGMP inspection status and then can be considered as CVE30. This will end my talk. The topics I covered today were taken from the following resources. These are available guidance in the agency websites. Please look into these guidance for additional information. Now, I will have a challenge question. The applicant should provide certificates of analysis for the alternate drug substance from the drug substance manufacturer, drug product manufacturer, both drug substance and drug product manufacturers. I will wait for a few seconds for the answer. And the answer is C. Both drug substance and drug product manufacturers. The applicant should provide certificates of analysis for the alternate drug substance from both drug substance and drug product manufacturers. Now, the facility assessment perspective will be discussed by my colleague, Dr. Bo Jiang. Thank you.
Thanks, Rajib. I will be providing some tips from facility assessment perspective and covering a simplified overview on data integrity assessment and its impact on applications. When a new API supplier is proposed, it normally involves multiple facilities, and we look for clear roles and responsibilities for each facility, whether it is for manufacturing, testing, or simply storage, or it is for development batches, exhibit batches, or commercial operations. And the roles and responsibilities need to be consistent between DMF 356H and Module 3 in the application. We also look for a complete list of all facilities, including all intermediate sites, from the DMF. For any reason, if some facilities will be excluded from commercial operations, a revised LOA later needs to be included in the application. OPMA takes a risk-based approach in assessing facilities based on the roles and responsibilities proposed for each facility. We look at the facility experience and any inspection history that are available to us. We may request a pre-approval inspection if necessary to further assess the facility on site. Keep in mind that facility CGMP compliance status may change any time before the application go day due to CGMP violations, which may or may not be related to data integrity issues. When the facility compliance status changes, it will prevent application approval. Additional API suppliers can be proposed in the applications, either before the application approval or post-approval. Most of the time, the original API supplier will be withdrawn due to CGMP compliance issues, and when that happens, we normally look for if there are any data integrity concerns at the original supplier sites, as any data integrity concerns, once confirmed to be data integrity violations, may impact the data reliability in the submission, and therefore impact the application approval. Data integrity issue is a very important issue because FDA must have confidence in the data in an application before it can be approved. Any breach in data integrity erodes or breaks the trust between the FDA and the industry. The data integrity violations are most discovered during inspections, normally as the tip of an iceberg, and then become larger and larger. Once it is confirmed, all the data in submission becomes questionable. Assessment of data integrity is a very lengthy process involving multiple FDA offices, including ORA, OMQ in the Office of Compliance, OPMA in OPQ, and other offices. We look at what types of GMP violations are, whether it is testing to compliance, or data deletion, falsification, or inadequate OOS investigation, or inadequate data control, etc. We try to understand the scope of the data violations, such as any pattern or practice at the site, and how long the practice existed, and which GMP system may be impacted, and how many facilities may be involved, etc. Based on all information available, we assess the impact on pending and approval applications. The OPMA DI assessment is a collaborative effort with ORA and OMQ. While OMQ is performing its own assessment from compliance perspective, OPMA looked at data validity based on third-party forensic analysis and any data integrity audit report. OPMA makes materiality assessment on application data, focused on bio batch, exhibit batch, and registration batch data. The assessment outcome is application-specific and could be no DI concern if not sufficient evidence available. It could be inconclusive, in which case we may send out a request for additional information or follow-up inspection. The outcome could be that the data are confirmed unreliable, in which case a complete response letter will be sent to the applicant. To remediate the data integrity issue in the application, we may request third-party independent test results. We may request to manufacture a new batch and conduct a new BE study. As you can imagine, all those activities will delay the application approval. The drug substance facility will be put on OAI status, which prevents approval of all applications that using the subject API supplier. This case study is based on the real drug application with the name removed, and the dates listed here are not real. The drug substance facility was inspected in September 2000. The 43 citations included data integrity violations, but not significant enough to support the OAI classification. 2 years later, another inspection was conducted, and this time more evidence became available, and the final classification was OAI. A warning letter was issued later on to the firm, and regulatory meeting and teleconference were conducted, and expectations were provided to the firm. Parallel to OMQ assessment, OPQ has identified the time period since September 2000, after which all data generated at the facility are impacted by the DI violations. For this application, the drug substance lot was manufactured in February 2003. Therefore, the drug substance data are considered unreliable and impacting the BE start outcome. A complete response letter was sent and requests the firm to choose one of the three options below. Option 1, to confirm the quality of the original drug substance lot and provide additional data that are listed here. Option 2, to manufacture a new drug product batch with a new drug substance lot from the original source and conduct a BE study on one condition that is specified here. Option 3, manufacturing a new drug product batch with a new drug substance source and conduct a new BE study. The firm responded to the CR letter, withdrawing the original drug substance site. However, no data integrity audit report was provided. The proposal is not acceptable, and an information request letter was sent to the firm to request the data listed in option 1 above. The firm responded to the IR letter, committing to options 3 above, and basically to repeat the BE study and replace the BE data in the application. The application was CDER due to inadequate BE review. That concludes my talk. I included some additional resources here. The first guidance is about identifying facilities in applications, and the rest of the guidances are about data integrity and remediation, which may be helpful. I would like to thank Pei, Rapti, Adit, and Derek for their guidance and providing comments on my slides. And I also like to thank OPMA DI working group members for the very interesting discussion on this topic. Challenge question number 1. What facility information for API supplier is required in drug applications? A. Clear and consistent roles and responsibilities. B. Complete list of manufacturing, testing, and storage facilities for all intermediates and final drug substance. C. LOA letter should specify facilities for commercial operations if a subset of facilities are proposed. D. All of the above. The answer is D. Challenge question number 2. When data integrity issues are confirmed at a drug substance site, which of the following could happen? A. Request independent test data and additional information to assure quality of the drug substance data. B. Manufacture new batches using a new API supplier and conduct a new BE study. C. Facility OAI status prevents approval of all applications using the subject API supplier. D. All of the above. The answer is D. Thank you very much for your time, and I would like to take any questions you may have.
Good afternoon. In this session, we'll be talking about post-approval changes, how to correctly manage them, and we'll also be talking about updates to post-approval changes that were implemented in October of last year in GDUFA III. So our learning objectives for this session are to understand the reporting categories for post-approval submissions, how to avoid common deficiencies when you submit these changes, and we'll talk about the GDUFA III updates. So what are some of the common post-approval quality changes? What would a firm be changing after approval? It might be changing some issues with the drug substance, such as a site change or a source, or how the drug substance is synthesized and what equipment is used, for example. Also, there might be changes in the drug product, which would be new formulations, there might be new strengths, you may change excipients, of course the manufacturing site might change, and the process and the equipment, etc. may all change. There may be changes in the container closure system. You may be going from bottles to blisters and things like that. You want to add new types of containers. And one more type of change would be where the drug is actually tested and packaged. There might be changes in those sites. So when the supplement is submitted for these post-approval changes, sometimes a complete response letter is issued. And what would be the causes for those complete responses? Sometimes it's a change in the API source, but that source has not been accepted. The drug master file, which is referenced, is not in an acceptable state. Sometimes firms want to widen their impurity specifications or even the dissolution specifications, and these have to be appropriately justified. And when they're not, or not done, these changes aren't qualified, a CR letter would issue. If it's a change in the drug product site, and the site is not under good compliance right now, that would give a deficiency. And changes in the container closure do lead to deficiencies if they're not shown to be as protective as previously.
So what are the type of reporting categories for changes? There are major, moderate, and minor. A major change would be considered a prior approval supplement, meaning that it needs approval from the FDA before that change could be effected. Moderate change would be, there are two types, what we call changes being affected 0 or changes being affected in 30 days. And a change being affected 0 means the change can be implemented immediately after the supplement is received at the FDA. And a changes being effective 30 means the change can only be effected 30 days after receipt. A minor change is a change that can't be reported in the annual report. And in the annual report, those changes are reported as what happened that year. And here are some examples that could be reported in the annual report. Reducing an overage that's in the original formulation. If you want to extend the expiration date based on the protocol that was approved in the application. If you're making a change to comply with a compendial, basically a change in the USP. If you want to go along with that change, that's a kind of reportable. A change in the supply of an excipient, if it's the same excipient. A change in how the drug is manufactured by changing the order of addition in solution products. Or certainly tightening of an acceptance criterion can be annual reportable. On the other extreme, these are examples of changes that require prior approval. So these would be adding a new API supplier, if you're changing the whole route of synthesis of the drug substance, if you're widening specifications, if you're changing the equipment in the manufacturing equipment for the different equipment that uses different operating principles. Adding a new flavor or color is a prior approval change. Adding a new strength is a prior approval change. And changing from a glass ampule to a glass vial with a closure is a prior approval change. So how do we, when we get these changes in the FDA, how do we process them? The supplement is received. It is then assigned to one of the reviewers, and the reviewer has to decide, well, the firm submitted that as a CB30. Does it really belong in this CB30? If yes, it's reviewed, and then an action is taken. An information request might be requested before the final action letter. If, however, the reviewer decides that the change does not fit under changes being affected, the change is then elevated or denied to a prior approval supplement, and the applicant must resubmit the change as a prior approval supplement. One thing that's important, that if it's a special circumstance, the firm may request from the FDA that the prior approval supplement is reviewed in an expedited manner. And the cases would be in a drug shortage or extraordinary hardship to the firm. Could be a COVID drug, which we would give an expedited review in the last couple of years. And what are some reasons why when it's submitted as a CBE, it's denied to a prior approval? It could be an API process change. The drug product manufacturing site change is not acceptable. The container closure change is not acceptable. You're adding a new sterile filling line that's never been used before. And a change in the stability protocol. Those would be reasons that the CB supplement could be overruled and changed to a prior approval supplement. Now, to make sure your supplement gets reviewed correctly and leads to a expedited approval, follow these tips. Use all the regulations and guidances. And don't just rely on the data to say this is a CBE. It's the change itself, not the results of the change. All in the cover letter, all the changes need to be listed clearly so we don't miss anything. Make sure you know what's happening in the USP so you could make the changes appropriately. And make sure you work with your DMF holder closely in collaboration so that any changes in the DMF are reported to you and you're able to report those to the FDA. So here's a question that let's see if you picked up during my talk. Applicant wants to add an additional API supplier to increase the capacity for a drug shortage product. That change should be submitted as what? As a prior approval supplement? As a CBE 30 supplement? As a prior approval supplement but requesting expedited review? Or as a CB0? Well, the answer would be a new API supplier is usually a PAS, but if it's in a shortage situation, you could request and you should request an expedited review. Next, Benga will be talking about recent updates in GDUFA III. Thank you, and I'll hand this over to Benga.
Thanks, Paul, and thanks SBIA for giving me the opportunity to speak today. Continuing with the topic of managing quality post-approval supplements, quality-related changes, I'm here today to speak more on GDUFA-related changes. So our learning objectives be here is to understand the go dates for prior approval supplements, the benefits of using a cover letter attachment with your various submission types for supplements, your PASs, your CPE 0s and 30s, the PEPFAR post-tentative approval amendment and other amendments as such, a description of the types of post-approval submissions that are accepted in GDUFA III as a controlled correspondence. In addition, some thoughts to when to submit a post-complete response letter clarification request, and also what to consider when submitting a reclassification of facility-based major complete response letter amendment for a prior approval supplement. And finally, what qualifies for a request for reconsideration for supplements? Even though this is not new to GDUFA III, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to highlight some of these as well for your benefit. So the go dates, as you see on the screen here, remains the same actually from GDUFA II to GDUFA III. Our standard PASs, depending on if it requires a pre-approval inspection or not, will be 6 months and 10 months accordingly. And for the priority prior approval supplements, depending on if it requires a pre-approval inspection or if you've submitted a pre-facility correspondence for us to review and it qualifies, as noted in the commitment letter, the timelines are, as noted there, it's 4 months, 8 months, and 10 months accordingly. For the amendments that are received for the standard PAS major amendments, depending on if it requires a pre-approval inspection or not, it'll be 6 months if there's no inspection required and 10 months if there is. For the priority ones, again, similar timelines of the 4, 8, and 10 months as applicable depending on if an inspection is needed and also based on if a PFC was submitted as noted in the commitment letter. The final part to this is nothing has changed with respect to the minor PS amendments. Both standard and priority will receive a 3-month submission date. Of course, the goal is to have at least 90% of these covered within the respective go dates, and I believe for the most part you all can attest to we've done a great job with adhering to these commitments and goal timelines. So the cover letter attachment, the agency released a guidance document back in December 2021. And the intent of this was to use this attachment for control correspondences and the submissions. I will say that it has become very beneficial for those who have included this with their submissions, with the PASs and for CBs as well. We note that it helps definitely in preparing the cover letter, but it helps us as the agency when we receive them to identify various aspects of the submission, which includes, of course, the application number, the dosage forms, the various disciplines that will be involved in the review that you believe, based on your assessment of the information, that will be involved in the review of the supplements. Also, I guess, pertinent information like facilities that will be involved as well, and what the supplement provides for, among other pertinent things. The next 5 or 6 slides are just showing you basically a snapshot of the various parts of this form. It is in the appendix section of the guidance, so if you're unfamiliar with it, I'll encourage you to please look at it. It's a great tool, and as mentioned, it helps our process during triage. So what I'm showing you here is just one of the next series of slides that covers the different information included in that form. So if you can use it, we'll definitely appreciate it. PS submissions based on agency requests. So we oftentimes, when we review not often, I guess I should restate that, when we do review a CB0, CB30 that's elevated to a prior approval supplement, I guess as we call it internally when we deny to PAS, it often is, when the PS is submitted, is accompanied with a cover letter as well. So as covered in the previous section, of course, that attachment form would be great to include. But more importantly, in the cover letter, please include a reference to the date you had the communication with either the OGD-RPM or the OPQ-RBPM, informing you of our decision to deny to PAS, and also who your point of contact was in that communication. This helps when we receive the PAS. This helps during our triage process, since there were designated people who looked at that submission at the time of receipt. We oftentimes like to give the same review team once the PS comes in. So when we can identify this early on in the cover letter, it helps with the process. So we definitely appreciate that. As mentioned earlier, there is some changes to the control correspondences as it applies to post-approval submissions, specifically in this case, I guess to PASs alike, but applies to any one of them submissions. So we published our draft guidance in December of 2022. As I just indicated here, after issuance of a complete response letter or tentative approval letter, you can now submit a control correspondence if you're looking for clarification on some of the deficiencies or comments. After ANDA approval, general post-approval inquiries prior to submitting things, you can also use that pathway to submit the inquiries for a response. Please note that number 2 here, that things that are not covered are things that are available in public guidances. We won't address those, but other types of things we would. So I definitely encourage you to have a look at the guidance document. The post-complete response letter clarification teleconferences between FDA and the applicants existed in the prior GDUFA period and is still here as well. In GDUFA III, we published a guidance on this back in October of last year, and we talked more about the opportunity. This was an opportunity to clarify deficiencies, either the major or minor deficiencies that may have been issued in a complete response letter. I noted here that questions requiring further agency review, disputes about classification of your CRL, or new information submitted would not be addressed. The intent of the post-complete response letter clarification teleconferences are really just to help clarify identified deficiencies. In addition to a GDUFA III that we didn't have in prior cycles, which is of great benefit, is the reclassification of facility-based major complete response letter amendments. So this reclassification is specific to when we issue a complete response letter, and the only major deficiency is facility-based. So you have the opportunity now, if you have, based on the supporting information, if you believe we should reclassify your submission at the time of receipt from a major to a minor. And we have provided information out there in the public domain to give some form of guidance as to how you should go about making those submissions. At least it's documented in the commitment letter. But the key point here is you must make that request at the time of submission. So when you submit your CRL, you're submitting a reclassification request from major to minor with the necessary supporting information. If it qualifies, of course, we'll consider that and make that determination at the time. The last part here, again, is the request for reconsideration. Something that's not new to GDUFA III, but we found it to be worthwhile just as a reminder, is a pathway to handle FDA regulatory actions that relates to a PAS and has scientific significance. And this, however, other actions could be a refuse to receive decision, tentative approval letters, complete response letters, classification of a major amendment, classification of the standard review status, and also a CB0 denied to PAS. You have the opportunity for us to request, to ask us to reconsider our decision. So that pathway is available to you as well. All right. So wrapping this up, we have the challenge question. And this is, an applicant was issued a complete response letter for a prior approval supplement, which included the following major deficiencies: drug product, microbiology, and facilities. Which of the following pathways is appropriate for the reconsideration reclassification requests from major to minor? For this specific question, though it may seem tricky, but the pathway for this is a request for reconsideration. And again, this is if you're looking for the agency to consider reclassifying it from major to minor, you wouldn't submit this in a control correspondence. You wouldn't submit this in a post-CRL teleconference. The reclassification D doesn't qualify because there are other deficiencies that were classified as major. So not just facilities. As you recall, that pathway is only for if the only major deficiency in your PAS is a facility. In this case, you may submit it as a request for reconsideration from major to minor. And of course, if it qualifies, we will reconsider it. We will reclassify. Well, I guess the reconsideration will be granted rather to change it from major to minor. I thank you for your time. I look forward to hearing your questions during the Q&A session. Thanks once again.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for taking the time to join us today. My name is Michael Chasey, and I'm the Director of the Division of Pharmaceutical Quality Programs within ORA's Office of Pharmaceutical Quality Operations. My colleague, Lane Christensen, and I will be spending a few minutes discussing with you the best practices for remote interactive evaluations, or RIE, and other alternative inspection approaches. Previous SBIA talks have each covered the topics of 704A4 records requests and RIEs in detail. Our intent today is to update you on the changes that have been made, specifically looking at RRAs, or remote regulatory assessments, and the recent draft guidance that was issued. In addition, we wanted to provide you updates on the use of these alternative tools and other efforts that have and continue to be ongoing in our efforts to evaluate manufacturing facilities. I will discuss FDA's remote regulatory assessment guidance. Lane will then talk about the implementation of alternative tools, such as 704A4 requests and RIEs. He will also discuss other tools, such as mutual recognition agreements, and finally, some lessons learned and a direction forward. On July 25th, 2022, FDA published a draft guidance for industry titled Conducting Remote Regulatory Assessments, Questions and Answers. This document was intended to provide FDA's current thinking regarding the requesting, conducting, and use of remote regulatory assessments by FDA. The draft guidance document was for comment purpose only, with the comment period closing on September 23, 2022. FDA is currently reviewing stakeholder comments and will address them in the updated version of the guidance for industry. In addition, recent changes to the law have added mandatory remote record request authority for devices and bioresearch monitoring to Section 704A4 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. So what exactly is an RRA? An RRA is an examination of an FDA-regulated establishment or importer and/or its records conducted entirely remotely to evaluate compliance with applicable FDA requirements. RRAs assist in protecting human and animal health, informing regulatory decisions, and verifying certain information submitted to the agency. RRAs are a tool FDA may use to support regulatory decisions and oversight activities. Currently, requests for records or other information from drug establishments under Section 704A4 of the FD&C Act is an RRA for which participation is mandatory, meaning they are not voluntary. However, RRAs that are not conducted under these authorities, such as a remote interactive evaluation, are voluntary in that an establishment can decline to participate or withdraw participation during the RRA, in which case the agency would consider other tools for evaluating compliance with FDA requirements. So why did FDA draft this guidance? Based on our experience during the COVID-19 public health emergency, FDA has noted the value of RRAs and concluded that they should be used for certain scenarios outside the current pandemic and for all types of FDA-regulated products. The draft guidance is intended to increase industry's understanding of RRAs and facilitate FDA's process for conducting RRAs. It is also intended to provide answers to frequently. So when may FDA initiate or request to conduct an RRA? FDA may initiate, or in the case of a voluntary RRA, request to conduct an RRA whenever we determine an RRA is appropriate to help fulfill the agency's regulatory responsibilities and protect human and animal health. For example, when FDA cannot conduct an inspection due to travel limitations brought on by pandemics, such as natural disasters or other unstable situations, making travel infeasible. In addition, when FDA determines that an RRA will assist FDA in conducting elements of establishment oversight or support regulatory decision. Examples include preparing for an already planned inspection, following up on a consumer complaint, assisting in verifying that an establishment has completed certain corrective activities, or supporting the review of a marketing submission. FDA will use a risk-based approach to determine whether to initiate or request an RRA. It is important to note that programs and centers within FDA may assess risk differently based on the product. The ultimate decision to initiate an RRA rests with FDA, as FDA retains discretion to employ RRAs as appropriate. At this time, we do not accept requests for FDA to perform an RRA. Is an RRA considered an inspection? No. Generally, an inspection, such as described in Section 704A1 of the FD&C Act, involves duly designated officers or employees of the FDA physically entering at a reasonable time and a reasonable manner an establishment subject to regulations under the FD&C Act to determine compliance with applicable FDA requirements. For this reason, we do not consider an RRA to satisfy statutory requirements that specify inspections under Section 704 of the FD&C Act. FDA will not display credentials during an RRA. FDA will not issue a Form 482 notice of inspection during a domestic RRA, nor will FDA issue a Form 483 inspectional observations during the RRA process. FDA's experiences so far have identified significant benefits using RRAs. For instance, RRAs have been used to help support and reduce delays of approval or authorization of marketing submissions for FDA-regulated products during the COVID-19 pandemic. They have also helped inform FDA decisions regarding whether to authorize multiple emergency use authorization requests for COVID therapies. RAs have assisted FDA in verifying corrective actions taken in response to inspections of previously compliant manufacturers and in gaining compliance insight when it is not practical to inspect. RAs have also provided information about deficient practices, which led FDA to take regulatory actions, conduct inspections, and has helped inform future inspection planning. Before I turn it over to Lane for his portion of the presentation, let's see if anyone was actually listening to me. Question to you is, what are some examples of a remote regulatory assessment? Note that more than one answer can apply. Is it A, a request for records and other information under Section 704A4 of the FD&C Act? Is it B, an on-site inspection? Is it C, a remote interactive evaluation? Or is it D, all of the above? The correct answers are A, a mandatory request for records and other information under Section 704A4 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and C, a voluntary remote interactive evaluation. It is important to note that an RRA is a fully remote activity with no physical FDA investigator presence on site at the facility. This concludes my presentation. Thanks so much for spending time with me, and I'll be back at the panel session to answer any questions that you may have. Lane, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Mike, for setting this up and turning it over. Greetings, everyone. My intent today is to share with you how RRAs are being applied to the work we do here at the FDA. So this is the workflow that was implemented for facility evaluations since the COVID-19 public health emergency began. When an original application or supplement comes in, it lists facilities with various manufacturing-related responsibilities. Based on the following risk factors, we make a determination if the listed site or sites are acceptable or whether a pre-approval inspection is needed. If not, then the facility is found adequate. Now, if yes, we will evaluate if we can use alternate tools. If when using any of these alternate tools, we find that a facility risk is low with respect to its ability to successfully complete their defined roles, then the facility will be recommended adequate for approval. And if we determine an on-site inspection is needed, then we work with our inspection colleagues to coordinate within the timelines established under various user fee programs. Now, I'm not going to give much of a background on our 704A4 records request program, and we'll refer you to other information, including a presentation given previously by FDA colleagues, one noted here at the bottom of the slide. Although initially approved in 2012 under the FDASIA amendments for the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, it wasn't until the pandemic that we really saw wide use of this provision. In just a matter of a few years, the agency has completed a large number of such requests, with over 1,000 as of the date when this data was pulled. We have seen a number of requests for both our surveillance and our pre-approval programs. For surveillance, over 35 import alerts have resulted in our efforts, divided between simple refusals for the Import Alert 9932 program and for issues with good manufacturing practice GMP operations under the 6640 Import Alert. For pre-approval assessments, we've had over 330 sites were evaluated, which represents even more than that number of total applications. We've been able to approve over 330 applications based on the outcome of our records requests. During this time, over 75 applications were put on hold due to issues identified during the review of the record request. We're looking into this data. It shows that these approval and withhold actions represent all across the different drug programs and include different dosage forms and locations across the globe. And as I put this presentation together, I was able to take a further look at pre-approval data and those specific applications that were withheld in the 2021 timeframe, after we completed records requests. I was interested in data from 2021 since it has been over a year since the evaluations were completed, and it allowed me to also see what happened subsequently to the review requests. What I found was that these withheld sites were not location-specific, being across Europe and throughout Asia. Responsibilities of these sites that were initially withheld also varied. Simply due to the difference in volume of applications between programs, it made sense that the original ANDA sites were associated with more application and made up roughly 60% of those that were withheld. Taking a further look at what happened next to these sites, close to half of them were initially withheld as an outcome of a records request. They were able to resolve those issues through subsequent responses to the observations, and some of them were able to do so through on-site inspections. The rest of the sites, the other half, appear to still be pending over a year later. So in these cases, the agency issued a complete response letter. In these cases, due to the issues that included at a minimum the outcome of the record requests. Looking at the complete response letters, however, it suggested that there were more issues indicated than just these facilities. One particular site I noticed responded to the records request that they didn't conduct the listed testing responsibilities and weren't even doing business with the application holder. And so I'm sure that we can all agree in such a case that it was better to resolve this through a records request than it was to have somebody out doing an inspection of that site. Now for RIEs, I wish not to provide too much background information on this as it has been covered in previous generic drug forums. If you're unfamiliar or wish for more background information on this topic, I refer you to our guidance and in presentations from last year highlighted here at the bottom of the slide. Now checking out some specific examples. Both of these here are for drug product manufacturers, both at foreign locations. Facility 1 was a drug product manufacturer for 2 pending ANDAs, both for delayed release tablets representing a new product profile for the facility. One of them included a unit operation that was new to the site, being hot melt extrusion. Now, the second facility was a manufacturer for an aerosol foam combination product, which was a new type of product for the facility, new as being per the application history with the agency. They did, however, have experience manufacturing this type of product for other markets, as we discovered during the course of the RIE. At the conclusion of a records request for both sites, it was determined to conduct an RIE to go through the proposed operations. The opportunity allows to spend time discussing with subject matter experts and visualizing operations and following up with questions on testing and laboratory capabilities. In the end, both sites were found adequate and each application was recommended for approval. We now look at a couple of examples for foreign sterile manufacturers. Number 3 was for an NDA proposing to fill a solution into prefilled syringes. During the previous inspection, the site had been noted as having a number of significant issues that led to an OAI, an official action indicated outcome, where the site ended up even receiving a warning letter. During a subsequent meeting when discussing the facility status of the approvability of the NDA, the site inquired about the possibility of conducting an RIE. In addition to not accepting requests for an RIE due to the significant risks identified during the previous on-site inspection and the outstanding concerns with the site, it was determined an on-site inspection was necessary and a satisfactory outcome required before the site could be approved for the NDA. For the next example, number 4, a high priority application was submitted under an emergency use authorization mechanism. Regarding the contract manufacturer, is recognized the agency had previous history with the site and had approved a similar product for use in the United States. We decided to first pursue a 704 records request leading to this RIE. During the course of the RIE itself, the assessment team identified multiple issues, one of which related to concerns with ensuring an aseptic environment during the compounding and in product fill steps. As such, the team was unable to recommend approval. The final decision was made that any fixes or corrections made in response to the observations issued needed to be verified and further evaluated during another on-site inspection. In each of these examples, I have made reference to outcomes and would like to go over the different outcomes for our RA, specifically for 704 record requests and RIEs. And when conducting either a record request or an RIE, if there are no observations made, it is very likely the site will be found adequate. In the case of a record request, you should expect to receive a Form 4003 stating the record request is complete and there are no further requests. For an RIE, a no observation memo will be sent during the closeout of the meeting. Now, if observations were made, the Form 4003 will include an attachment with an observations letter to communicate the outstanding issues along with instructions for responding. In the case of an RIE, the observations will be discussed at the closeout meeting, and an observation letter will be provided along with instructions for responding. In both cases, the agency encourages firms to submit responses within 15 days. After this round of communication, if issues remain unresolved, a facility may be found inadequate and the application would likely receive a complete response letter. In this case, a post-action letter will then be sent to the facility after the action date. The responses to the post-application letter will be evaluated at the next review cycle. During the next review, the facility is again evaluated based on similar factors as before, where responses to the RRA, including the PAL responses, will be included in the evaluation. So depending on these efforts, the facility may end up requiring an on-site inspection or use of alternate tools once again. So I'd like to go over some suggestions for enabling a successful RRA. And as you can tell, many of these interactions are very similar to an inspection, on-site inspection. As such, it's very important that you commit the same level of importance and attention as you would to an on-site inspection. Even though we keep saying that RRA is not an inspection, its outcome could affect the regulatory decision and the application and the timing of that decision. Anything that you don't understand or have doubts about, anything that seems unreasonable, please ask for clarification before committing to executing that request. Document organization is extremely important. It goes with both types of RRAs. If we really want to be efficient with your time in preparation as well as our time for your reviews. Have subject matter experts on hand during the RIE sessions. You're ready to answer questions as you would during an on-site inspection. And finally, technology and platforms used for the RIEs can make or break our planned out interactions. Please check, please double check, please triple check for readiness. Are you able to have multiple breakout rooms? Can you zoom up on the line during production? Are there any dead spots in your facility that will drop a signal? This brings us to our second and final challenge question. The following statements about an RRA are true except A, virtual tour during an RIE doesn't need to be conducted all at once. B, records requests are made in advance or in lieu of an inspection within a reasonable time frame in either electronic or physical form. C, since they are not considered an inspection, it is not necessary to respond to any observations made during an RRA. Or D, generally, your records requested under FD&C 704A4 before an RIE. If you chose C, then you are correct. You are encouraged to respond within 15 business days to any observations that are made during an RRA. Your timeliness responding can play a big part in the approvability of any referencing application or applications. So with that, I wish to summarize with a few closing remarks. The first is really a question. What will inspections and our interactions with manufacturers look like in the future as we get more comfortable with these tools? In order to get there, we are leveraging now the lessons learned from across applications and inspection programs to inform how to improve. For RIAs, they may be conducted in advance or in lieu of an inspection. An FDA may conduct an RRA following an inspection in order to conduct follow-up activities with the establishment or to assist in verifying corrective actions if appropriate. So really the story is far from being over. There's a lot going on. Now is a great time as FDA continues to gather experience, seek feedback, work with stakeholders, hear what industry has to say, learn from best practices, learn from comments and feedback on our published guidances, and work together with the regulatory counterparts and simply being able to use these tools more. We're currently reviewing feedback on the draft RRA guidance and hope to get an updated version out shortly. And then finally, expanding mandatory remote records request authority to be inclusive of both devices and by our research monitoring program. With that, thank you for your time. We look forward to any questions you may have during the panel discussion.
Thanks so much for another group of great presentations. As a reminder to our attendees, if you haven't had a chance to enter your questions into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many as time allows. It's our pleasure to welcome to our Q&A panel Dr. Derek Smith. He joined FDA in 2010 and served as a compliance officer, CMC assessor, quality assessment lead, branch chief, and division director prior to his current role. Derek is the Associate Director of Regulatory Affairs for the Office of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment within OPQ. He provides leadership and oversight for the assessment of the manufacturing process and facilities for biologics and small molecule drug applications with a focus on the integration of application assessment and inspection findings and data reliability assessments. He also serves as a co-chair for the New Inspection Protocol Project initiative for the pre-approval inspections and is a member of the Knowledge-Aided Assessment and Structured Application Initiative Steering Committee. Looks like we have some questions coming in, and we do have a couple questions already queued up for our first panelist, Keduo Qian. And here is the first question. Please explain when a change in drug substance manufacturer would be a facility change. Can a facility change be submitted as a CBE 30?
Thanks. So a facility change involves changes in the location of the site of manufacture of intermediate, unfinished, or finished final drug substance. There are circumstances that facility change can be reported as a CBE 30. For example, a change to an alternate manufacturing facility within the same master file or within the same corporate ownership, or a change in the manufacturing for a drug substance intermediate. The change shouldn't involve any route of synthesis manufacturing changes. Usually, the quality of the intermediate or the drug substance and the impurity profile should be comparable between the existing and the proposed sites. Of course, this is assessed by case, and please refer to the draft guidance for more examples. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have another question for Keduo Qian, and here is the question. Should a nitrosamine impurity assessment be part of any API assessment for a change in the API manufacturer for both pre- and post-approval submissions and be provided in the submission, or should be kept at the site to align with the nitrosamine guidance, which notes the assessment does not need to be provided in the marketing application?
So a nitrosamine impurity assessment should be submitted, especially if you have a change in the API manufacturer for both pre- and post-approval submissions. And per the FDA guidance for the nitrosamines in human drugs,
all manufacturer of the chemical synthesized API should take appropriate actions to mitigate the risk. And you should review the manufacturing process and perform risk assessments to identify any potential nitrosamine impurities. And please remember to submit, especially if you have an API manufacturer change. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next panelist. We've got a couple questions that came in for Rajib Paul. And here is the first question. What if the API source did not change, but the release test facility changed due to closure? And if no specs and no change in specs, can this be a CBE 30?
This is a great question. If the API source did not change, however, testing facility changed due to closure, where no change in the specifications will be a CBE 30, provided that the post-testing facility has satisfactory cGMP status. However, if the new facility does not have satisfactory cGMP status, it should be a PS. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Rajib Paul, and here's the question. If there is a change in the residual solvent at final drug substance stage made by the approved API manufacturer, then for introducing a new residual solvent in the ANDA, what should be the filing category and the documents required?
Thank you for the excellent question. If there is a change in the residual solvent in final drug substance stage made by the approved API manufacturer, then for introducing a new residual solvent in ANDA, it should be a prior approval supplement. But the guidance for industry changes to an approved NDA or ANDA, Revision 1, published in April 2004, Section 7B5. The applicant should provide certificates of analysis for the new API manufactured with the new solvent, both from the API manufacturer and the drug product manufacturer, and manufacture a drug product batch and submit data to show that the new solvent does not affect the drug product quality. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next panelist, we have a few questions that came in directed to Bo Jiang, and here is the first question. What are the critical factors that may fail or cause the facility to fail an inspection?
That's a good question. This would be depending on what type of facility inspection that is. If it's a GMP inspection, any significant GMP violations that may result in the inspection failing. And if it is a PAI inspection, pre-approval inspection, so a couple of things that could happen. First of all, if that inspection found out the information at the site is not consistent with the data in the submission, that could be a major deficient. And then the second one could be the facility is not ready for commercial operation. And another reason could be any significant data integrity issue identified at the facility that could fail the facility inspection as well. Thank you.
Thank you for responding, and we do have one more question for Bo Jiang, and here is the question. One drug substance manufacturing site is on OAI status. Do I need to repeat the bioequivalent study?
That's a good question. The answer could be it depends. If the GMP violations causing the facility OAI status include data integrity violations, and those data integrity violations impact the data reliability in the application, then a new B study is required to replace the data in the application. And also remember that the application will not be approved until that our GMP violation status is changed into compliance. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next panelist, we've got a few questions that came in for Paul Swartz, and here is the first question. I submitted a CBE supplement, but it was denied to a PAS. Can I appeal that decision?
If you get a denial from a CBE to a PAS, under the current way of doing things, you could submit a request for reconsideration in a way, an appeal, and that will be acted on quickly. And if it's if the FDA agrees with your request for reconsideration, the supplement will be reinstated and continue as a CBE. But if not, and you'll find out a reason why, then it would be denied. The denial will hold, and it would be you would have to resubmit as a prior approval supplement. But you should definitely, if you feel that you didn't get it wasn't correctly handled, submit that request for reconsideration.
Thank you for responding to that question. We do have one more question for Paul Swartz. This is the question. I need an additional site to package my drug product. What type of supplement should I submit?
Right. A change in site for packaging is typically a CBE 30, because it will require looking into the history of that particular site. If the site is acceptable, then it would be a CBE 30. But if it doesn't have a good compliance history, again, would be denied to a prior approval supplement.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next panelist, we have a couple questions that came in for Binga Okubadejo. And here is the first question. What are the timelines for an expedited PAS for a drug shortage product?
Thanks for that question. So the timelines as stipulated in the commitment letter, if it were granted for review for drug shortage for a priority review, if a pre-approval inspection is not required, it would be assigned a 4-month go date. If a pre-approval inspection is required, it will receive an 8-month time frame. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next panelist. I've got a few questions that came in for Lane Christensen, and here is the first question. How effective are the RIE inspections, and how do they compare to on-site inspections? Were the outcomes comparable and efficient?
So answering the second question first, I would say yes. How effective? Not sure about effectiveness, but how confident are we in these remote interactive evaluation inspections compared to on-site inspections? I would say the confidence is there in the decisions that we make. Otherwise, we wouldn't move forward with an approval determination. Those that I've been involved with, I think we were on a 12 plus or minus a couple hour time lag, and so we were up in the middle of the night, but we were able to focus 2-3 hours at a time, see what we needed to see, interview those that we needed to interview, and so it was a very directed approach each evening in our interactions with the site. We were able to see what all we wanted to see and take the time. And so at the end, when we closed them out, we felt good about what we had seen and any issues or any decisions that we wanted to make and recommendations for approval. So that confidence didn't seem any different than when going on site and spending 5 days, 7 full days
you're doing an inspection. So I think for myself and those that I've interacted with, they worked out quite well.
Thank you for responding to that question. Moving on to our next panelist. We've got a question that appears to be from Mike Chasey, and here is the question. What is the estimated time frame between when a company responds to a records request and when a closeout or observation letter should be expected?
Thanks, Ray, for that question. Generally speaking, the estimated time frame will depend on the complexity of the documents that have been submitted to support the application. And for review time, because we do want to provide time to communicate any issues that we have found during our review and allow time for response to any of the issues to support the final application decision. At the end of the day, this will all definitely be accomplished by the user fee date. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We've got a question just came in for Dr. Derek Smith, and here is the question. Regarding data integrity, you mentioned using third-party forensics analysis. What tools will the agency use or recommend for industry to consider to enhance detection of data integrity?
Thanks, Ray. With respect to the third-party testing that third-party audit that Bo discussed in his presentation, that is more about finding an independent analysis of the data integrity issues. So, what we're looking for when data integrity issues are found, we're looking for the facility, the applicants, to work with a third party to really assess the data. And so the tools, the assessment approach is really dependent upon what specific data integrity issues are observed, and how to then assess how deep those issues go and how much they impact either the facility's data from a manufacturing perspective or the DMF or application data. And so really it's a dependent situation based on what's found. And the third party audit is more about the independent analysis, right? So that it's someone that's providing a different, an outside perspective on what was going on in the facility, to ensure that there is some, objectivity to the analysis. And with respect to data integrity controls, I think there's a lot of different guidances and presentations out there that we've given in various spaces, either from OMQ or OPQ. And I would encourage everybody to go look at the data integrity guidance and some of the other presentations that we've given with respect to what you can do in a facility, to help maintain the state of data control, and ensure that operations aren't impacted by breaches in data integrity. Thanks, Ray.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have just under a minute left. We're going to try to squeeze one more question in. If Dr. Smith will, it looks like one just came in for him. And here's the question. As part of changing our API source, if the original source is later determined VAI after data integrity concerns are identified, does that resolve the concerns from the application and a DMF perspective?
Thanks, Ray. And yes, so I think as Bo said in his earlier response, it depends. The VAI CGMP classification may not necessarily reflect that the agency has found any retrospective analysis of data integrity violations cleared. In general, that just means that moving forward, the operations at the facility are considered VAI with respect to current good manufacturing practices. And so in those situations where there is a downgrade, from an initial or reclassification from OAI to VAI, the applicants and the DMF holders should work with their manufacturing facility to understand the impact of what those data integrity violations were, and how to, as I said just a few moments ago, how to work with a third party to independently assess those. Not just with is the data whole? Do we understand and trust the quality? But what does that mean from an overall review perspective in the data that the agency has reviewed? And so, the facility retrospective analysis that might be done by these independent third parties, they may say everything is okay, but it really comes down to you as the applicant or the DMF to also do your own assessment to what that means and how that fits into the data that the agency's reviewed to then further support ongoing review and hopefully eventually approval of high quality generic drugs. Thanks, Ray.
Well, we've all run out of time to answer questions in this session. A huge thank you to our panelists for answering a huge amount of questions that came in. We'll now enter into our break until 2:50 p.m. Eastern Time. Enjoy your break.